Okay, well, thank you guys for coming. My name is Glenn, and I work for Auth0, and I'm going to talk to you about serverless. How many people have heard that term, know what it is? Serverless compute. Does anyone want to take a shot at giving me a definition?
It's a lie.
It's a lie? Okay.
It's like the cake.
People agree with that as being a lie. It's a marketing term. Okay. So my name is Glenn. I work for a company called Auth0. Anybody here has heard of Auth0? Okay, so we have a solution for developers to build identity, build security into their applications, and support different types of identity providers. And we are also sponsoring this event. So before I get into my talk, I thought it sounds like for a lot of people, oh, not that. Okay, let's move on. Just sit back and take a walk down memory lane.
New York, 1997. The entire city is a walled maximum security prison. The bridges are mined.
Anybody here familiar with this movie?
The rivers are patrolled. And the United States police force has everything under control. They think. New York, the high adventure of the future.
High adventure of the future. Okay.
Snake!
So now you've met Snake. So Snake basically has gone to his team and he said, hey, we've got a problem. We need to basically wire up Twilio and Slack for the resistance. And what we're going to do is we need to provide a mechanism that's going to allow our soldiers out in the field to be able to send us critical messages, and we can get Slack notifications. Common need. All right, but we're going to need some servers to do this. Because what we really want to do is we've got these two different APIs. We've got Twilio, we've got Slack. We need a way to connect them. Well, the way we're going to connect them is we're going to have to put a server in the middle. It's a reasonable thing, and if we use Twilio, Twilio actually has webhooks. Webhooks are awesome. How many people here have heard of webhooks? Okay. So, you know, webhook is just basically you have a system that can invoke a URL. Lots of systems out there today support webhooks. One of the most common ones that developers work with is GitHub. GitHub, you can basically go in and add webhooks so you can monitor activity on your repos, but there's lots of different services out there. As we've been moving more towards this cloud computing service-based world that have adopted webhooks as a really simple model to integrate. But there's one caveat. You have to have a server. So if I go to GitHub, let's say, or I go to Twilio and I say I want to have a hook that will run whenever there are messages sent from a device, I need to stand up a server that's actually going to listen to that. Now, I might be going directly to a server that already supports that. And there are more and more servers that are coming online that actually natively understand the ability to work with webhooks. But you might need to do some kind of processing in the middle, which in this case we do. We're not just taking everything that's going to come from Twilio and send it to Slack. We want to filter and customize some of the logic. We want to pull out specific pieces of information, maybe doing transformation, etc. So, Snake doesn't like the idea of using a server. Because we need to end the server tyranny and oppression. What tyranny and oppression? What is Snake actually talking about? What he's really talking about is the pain that we have to go through deploying servers, managing servers, uptime. There's cost there. Keep servers up and running, especially if they're there just for the purpose of periodic types of activity. There's scale. How do I scale these things out? Now, of course, you can build infrastructure that will scale, but that's not easy to do. And the other thing is that in this world of where we have tons of cloud services. We see browser applications, for example, that basically are driven completely by different services. And so you want to do something in the browser. If you're not working with a pre-existing service, then you have to say to yourself, okay, well, I'll just put up a server that will be there mainly to just service the needs of that browser application. So he has a plan. He says, we're getting out of Serverland. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? We're going to go serverless. Come on, let me hear all the applause in the room. We're going to go to Webtask. So what is Webtask? So at Auth0, we actually have this identity product, as I mentioned, and one of the challenges that we had, which is what led us to actually building Webtask, is we have a fully customizable rules engine. Now, Auth0 is a product that runs in the cloud and it runs on-prem. We actually have a service that is hosted in AWS. And one of the things that we allow you to do, one of our value props, is we are highly customizable, very developer-centric. And so when a customer who's using Auth0 allows users to log in, there's various hooks where they can write custom logic. Now that custom logic is basically untrusted code. So we have to think about how are we going to run this code up in our environment. Now one answer could be, well, we'll just use webhooks and do kind of the tradition, well, it's now becoming the traditional model. It's the prevalent webhook model, which says, hey, give us a URL, we'll put the server up and we'll run the code. Well, that raises a whole bunch of questions, like, for example, first you have to have that endpoint deployed, which is going to handle that code. You need to make sure that that endpoint is actually going to be scalable to handle the number of requests that are coming through. There are security concerns. And one model would be, well, we just run their code directly within our application, but that has huge concerns because of security and isolation and other things. So we gradually ended up down the path of building our own serverless infrastructure. What I mean by serverless is it allows you to say, hey, I've got these business rules that I need to run at various points through Auth0's lifecycle. I don't need to deploy any kind of special server. I just give you the code, and then you take care of it for me. You make sure that that code will run, that that code has all the dependencies that it needs. I don't want to actually pay for that server to be running until it's actually needed. So what I really want is an experience of where I can give you the code, you can manage it, and I can know that I'm only going to be paying for the usage. And that is basically what the serverless model is about. When people say serverless, going through the marketing hype around it, why this term came about, is it's really about saying that, yes, there are servers, but they're not your servers. They're not your servers that you're worrying about and that you're having to manage. And you might say, well, there's things like Heroku, for example. I could run Heroku or I could run Azure websites. But even in that model, you have to think about this notion of an application. You're deploying an application and packaging up all the components of that application, and then you're deploying them, and then yes, you can get some elasticity and things like that, delayed activation. But with serverless, it's really about going even more fine-grained than that. It's saying, let's not think about this from a context of an application, because even an application becomes a monolithic thing that I have to deploy and manage. It's saying, let's go one level deeper. Let's go actually down to the level of functions. And this is where a term that you'll hear with serverless is function as a service. And that is basically the idea. The idea now is that instead of deploying lots of larger applications, I'm just deploying very fine-grained services. I can manage them individually, I can version them individually, I can upgrade them individually, I can test them individually, and I can scale them out individually. And that's a huge difference. So even if you were doing that like a Heroku site, for example, and it had multiple APIs, because you probably wouldn't do one per, you would basically group those together. Well, then there's a question of how does that scale up? So in a function as a service world, your scale up is functions. If this function is used more heavily than another, it's going to scale, it's going to have more utilization, and this other one that is not. So you basically have a pretty significant cost savings there. It's not all free. There are some challenges associated with it as well, like how do you manage these things? How do you version these things? So where Webtask comes in, if you go back to that diagram that I showed you, so we have Twilio, we have Slack, what's in between? Webtask will give you the ability to basically get a webhook with a server, but it's not a server that you have to manage. So you can simply say, give me a webhook, give me a URL, write some code, we'll make sure that it spins up, we handle dependency management, and I'll get into some more of the details there. So you'll also have a rich authoring experience. I will show you what that is. You can have GitHub integration, so you can actually still have your functions stored in repos, and you can have different branches and say that, oh, I want to upgrade this function, I can upgrade this function. Until I push it to the master branch, for example, it's never going to go live. It's really, really simple, and a big differentiator about our product is the fact that it works in the cloud and on-prem. So we have a hosted story in AWS. We've actually done an article on, we've done an article talking about our architecture where we talked about how we also fail over to Azure, so we can support both. But you can also run this, and many of our Auth0 customers actually run on-prem, and they run this entire infrastructure on-prem. So they're on-prem, but they're still running code that may be untrusted code. And so how do we handle this trust boundary? Under the hood, this is all containers. So we're using, this is a heavily containerized architecture, the way that this works. And that allows us to activate things on the fly when we need to, quickly tear things down, and handle dependency type management as well. So this is what it's going to solve for you. It's going to remove a lot of the headaches around deployment, scale, management, isolation. It's inherently isolated, so everything will be isolated. We handle latency. We guarantee high availability. That's part of what our product and our service does. And as I mentioned, works in the cloud or on-prem. So why would you use it? Well, I mentioned the first use case, which is what Auth0 used it for, which was for business rules. Another big one that we've seen is just glue code, and that's an example I'm going to show you today of where, hey, I just have two services together, then I need a way to wire them up. Let me do that in an ultra lightweight manner. You can make simple APIs with it. You can use it for automation, like I've got like my build script runs. I need to fire off something. Webtask is an easy way to do that, and a lot of tools, especially modern type build tools, are supporting the webhooks model. So those are kind of the primary use cases. All right, so show us how this works, Snake. Glad you asked. So the easiest way to get going is we actually have a CLI. So if you go to webtask.io, and you guys can all follow along if you want to try this. So if you do npm install wt CLI, you'll get the Webtask CLI, and you can do this right now if you want to. The sign up is super simple. You literally just do wt init, you give it your email address. We're going to send you an activation code in that email. You click on that link, everything is active, you're ready to go. So once I've got the CLI already, and I have it here right now, so you can see I have wt, which is for web tasks. You can see here what it's telling me to do is just create a very simple function. So I'm just going to copy this. And what this is doing is, I could do this in a text editor, it's just dumping it out to the console. So you can see right here that what it did was it basically wrote out some JavaScript, very simple JavaScript. Module.exports is a standard way to define a module in Node.js. And it's giving me a function that is accepting a callback parameter. And then what I'm doing is I'm just calling that callback right away, and I'm outputting a message of hello. I'm not doing anything sophisticated. And it's actually given me a URL. So I can just copy this URL, And actually, if you look down here, it's telling me that it sees that I created that task. So now I can basically run it. So I can just go here and run it with the browser. And you can see I got back hello. So that's how fast it is to get going with Webtask. You just get the CLI, basically install the CLI, sign up, which is instant through the CLI. You get back that email, click that link, and then we created a task. Now notice when I called create on the WT CLI, I passed it hello.js. So I could have passed it another file. I could have made that file with a text editor. I didn't have to do it the way that I did this here. We also have a way to do bundling. So if you have multiple files, like you have files in a folder and you want to do multiple files, you can. In general, when people are building web tasks, they're doing them in a very fine-grained manner, so usually that won't happen, but sometimes it does, and we do support that ability. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do. Another way that you can do this, let me go back to my slides here. Oh, and also from the CLI, you can do management and other kinds of things. So if I do like WTLS, you can see that I can list the web tasks that I have. I can delete them, remove them. This is the kind of things you would expect from a CLI. But another thing you can do is just get going without the CLI. And this is actually quite cool. So you can go to this URL, webtask.io/make. And what we have here, let me zoom out, is this is a cloud-based or browser-based editor for authoring with Webtask. And it's got a couple of special things in it. So I can edit any existing tasks that I have. As a matter of fact, you see here, I have a task called hello that we just did. I can go in here and there's my task and I can edit it. You get syntax completion right there. So I can edit it, I can run it right from the editor. So if I go here and click on the runner, and I'll change this to a post, and I'll click go. And then I can see real-time logs as I go. So you can actually see that it finished the request was invoked. So we give you like an online studio, essentially, for being able to edit your tasks and create your tasks. This also works from a device. You can actually use this from an iPad or an iPhone. So that's kind of the very basics. Now the editor does a bunch of other really cool things. So it has built-in support for templates. So if I click on templates here, and here's a simple function that is returning a JSON object of I am done. So if I run this one, and I copy this link right here, I didn't save. Yeah, we're fixing that actually. We have a version that will basically save for you automatically. So you can see that now I returned a JSON object that says I am done. I can do more sophisticated things. Like, let's say I wanted to use, let's see here, SendGrid. So we've got a bunch of different types of templates here. Like, let's see if I wanted to do like a Stripe payment. That's not going to work because that's browsers. What's really interesting too is that you're not limited to just returning JSON. You can actually return full payloads. So it can almost become like a mini web server where you could return like a static HTML page. I'm going to show you a little bit. One use case for that might be a common pattern is you have a Slack account and you want to enable people to be able to sign up for Slack. Well, it turns out that with Slack, the only way they allow you to do that out of the box is basically to send somebody a Slack invitation. But a common pattern has been to deploy like a site, and that site returns to you a page that you can log in on, and it uses Slack's API to do the login. You can do a similar kind of thing here using Webtask. Okay, so let's see what these templates are doing. And we're actually going to make these templates so they're customizable, so you can even add your own templates. So that's just the very bare basics of Webtask. I'm going to get into much more. So it's all Node.js, but we actually have some really rich support where you can add other languages. So when you're writing a web task, there are 3 function signatures that you can use. The default very basic one is you just use CB, which is a callback, and you're just calling that callback, and you can pass it a response. But what will allow you to do is, there's some other kinds of data that Webtask is built around, which I'm going to show you in a second, that you can access off of this CTX object, which is a context object. So if you want to get access to, for example, parameters that were passed in through the query string, we hang those right off of CTX. And we also have secrets, which I'm going to get to in a minute, which is really important. But the last thing we'll allow you to do if you want to is you can just get access to the raw request and response. So if you need to manipulate headers or do anything like that, and I'm going to show you an example of where I actually need to do that, you can do that simply by using that signature. And you even can use other kinds of languages, because one of the things that Webtask has, which I'm not going to go deep into detail with, is this concept of compilers. So Webtask will allow you to write a custom compiler that supports your own language. Where I think this is really interesting is not so much for programming languages, though we have an example that we use that for C#. So has anybody here ever heard of the Edge module for Node.js? Edge is a module that allows you to write C# code from your Node application. You can actually invoke C# code with C# DLLs and everything. And it's mainly useful for cases where you have existing logic that is written in C# or in .NET, compiled DLLs that you want to be able to access from within your Node application. One of the places where it's been quite popular is if you're running on Windows, you want to do things like work with the certificate store. There's no support in Node for being able to access the cert store directly, but you could do that, or access the registry even, because of the fact that you can use .NET APIs to do that. So with Webtask, we actually have a C# compiler, and using that, then you could actually author your task in C#, which you can see in this example. But where I think compilers are really interesting is domain-specific languages. So some industries, for instance, so if you think about the business rules use case, some industries like insurance and healthcare have very specific domain terms and lots of different rules that they need. Risk analysis is another one. So the potential here is to actually be able to build compilers for specific domains that then would allow authoring of tasks using a different language than a standard programming language. You can find out more about compilers on our website. Okay, so they're pretty impressed so far. But you can do a lot more. So if you're building, say, a Node app, the next thing you're going to need is actually modules. So we have more than 900 Node modules in the box. So let's say you want to use Twilio. Let's say like an example of the use case that I have talked about earlier on is where I want to talk to Slack. We have a Slack module built in. You just require the Slack module. It will be there, and you can write code that will talk to Slack. You can require a Twilio module if you want to use the Twilio module. And there's a ton, requests. A lot of the most common modules are out there. And we actually have our own Slack, community Slack for Webtask. And if you go there, or you file a GitHub issue and ask for a module, we'll add it right away. We actually are looking, though, in the future, in the near future, you'll be able to get access to any module that's available in NPM. Now, as a security company, we care a lot about securing your data. So one of the things that we do with Webtask is we allow you to actually define secrets. So a common use case, you're talking to some third-party service, and we've all seen the problems of where people have published like their GitHub tokens or their Azure keys or whatever it is because they included them in the repo. So with Webtask, what we allow you to do is define secrets as part of the task. Those secrets are encoded in a JSON web token, so nobody can get to them. And when you're authoring your code, we automatically surface those secrets so you can just get access to them in the code. So this way the actual secrets themselves don't appear. And I'll show you an example of that right now. So let's say I want to add a secret called, I don't know, called foo or something. So I can come here under secrets, and I can go and add a secret, and I'll just call it my secret value, and I'll just, because I'm secretive, I'll just use $sign for secret. Let's get rid of that. So now I've created this my secret value, and what I can do here is, if I've used the context object on the signature, then off of the context object I have secrets, and I can go, my secret value. So this is really a really useful feature because of the fact that when you're going to start to use Webtask, you're going to be talking to other kinds of systems, and you don't have to hard code those credentials within the code. Another interesting use case of this that we've seen, and there was an article on newstack.io, is imagine you have a website, so it's a single page application, and you want to send a message to Twilio directly. The user clicks a button, you want to send a message to Twilio. Now Twilio has a REST API, so I could go right into my browser and just make that call. But if I do that, I'm going to have to encode my key or my token somehow in the browser so that when it makes that call, it can pass that token information along. So because Webtask is really easy to get a webhook, basically what you can do is you can go and put those secrets into a Webtask which is secure, have the Webtask be the mechanism that goes and makes the call to that service that needs the secure authentication. And then what you can do is then your client actually doesn't directly see that service anymore. All your client sees is the Webtask. The fact that it's making a call to Twilio or SendGrid or wherever it's making the call is completely abstracted away. So one of our customers has been pretty interested in that aspect and looking at how they can use Webtask in that context. Okay, so let's take a look at another example. We'll use GitHub webhooks as the example. So this is a repo that I maintain. I'll actually go do it on my private one. Let me just do one thing. All right. You're going to see something, just ignore it. Ignore that button. So this is the experience that I get today if I go into GitHub. I want to go and create a webhook whenever something happens. So what I could do is, on the webhook, on the Webtask editor where I have this function that I've created, I could copy this, and I could just go over to GitHub and paste it in. Oops, I need to do that. Let's go here. Okay, so now I've added that webhook. So now I could go implement it. Take this out here. Collection. So I'm going to just, or maybe it's, double check. I think it's context.data. All right. So now that I have this running, I should be able to go into my GitHub repo and make a modification, and I should see that that will fire. So I'll go here, and I'll just make an arbitrary modification. Modify the readme. Okay, so we can see that that webhook fired, and I can see it within the editor. So that's a pretty simple use case, but a very common one that, like, think about it. Think about all the times that you want to basically monitor your GitHub repos. Now that becomes a very, very simple thing to do. Anybody here has done that? Has used webhooks to basically like monitor any activity from any of their services? What did you use?
For like auto deploying to an Azure website.
Oh, okay, yeah. So with Azure and Heroku and a lot of these guys, this is what they actually use when they do GitHub integration. And on that note, we actually support GitHub integration with Webtask as well. So if I'm authoring my tasks and I want to, I can basically wire up to a specific repository or create a new repository. So now I can take advantage of branches and things like that as part of my authoring experience. So I can say, well, I've got a dev branch, I've got a master branch. The master branch is the branch that basically is going to push the Webtask live, and this way I can support different types of environments. And if I wanted to, I could actually have two versions of the same task bound to different branches. So if I wanted to say, well, here's a test version of the task, and this is the live version of the task, you can do those kind of things as well. All right, so let's now dive into a more sophisticated example now that you've seen kind of the basics. And this was what we mentioned earlier. So we're going to have Twilio, and what we're going to allow is we're going to let people be able to send text messages to a specific account, and then based on those messages, something's going to happen. So there may be messages that are sent to Slack, and I also pulled in Splunk so I can basically monitor all the activity that is happening. And just to illustrate the use case here, that I'm providing that glue between these different services. So first, let me show you the task, and then we will, well, we'll start this way, and then I'll take a look at the code. So what I want you guys to do is go and SMS to this number. And there's two kinds of messages you can send. So you can send any message, in which case you're just basically letting us know that you're okay, you're letting us know your status. And if there's a problem, send 911. And what you're going to notice when you send 911 is, depending on what you send, the response should be actually different. Did you guys get back a response? I can tell, so we'll go over to our Slack room. Okay, so somebody sent help 911. Now, if you're not sending 911, all that information should be showing up within my Splunk instance. So I'm just going to open that up. So for those of you that are not aware of Splunk, Splunk is a tool for mining, basically for aggregating different types of log data, and you can mine that data, machine data. So I've got my Webtask configured to be sending that information as well as each request comes in to Splunk. So if I change this to be a 30-second real-time query, you can see, for example, that that message just came in, and that has all of the Twilio information. So part of the reason why I want to be able to manipulate things is because to Splunk, I want to send everything. To Slack, I only want to send a subset of the messages, and I'm pulling out the pieces that I'm interested in. So you can see, here you go. Okay, so we see the end-to-end. So how did this work? So if I come into my Webtask editor, I can actually edit other tasks. You can also do this from the CLI. Let's hide the logs. Can you guys see that text, or do you need me to make it bigger? I'll make it a little bigger. So first, we're going to use secrets here. And the reason we're going to use secrets here is because of the fact that in order to talk to Splunk, I I need to have an authentication token. I have a URL where that Splunk instance is running, which is running in the cloud. And also to talk to Slack. There's the Slack URL, which is really like a secure secret, because that's going to allow you to be able to send data to that Slack channel. So this is where the secrets feature is quite nice, because you can see that I just configured that right into the UI here. Now let's take a look at the code. So as I mentioned, we have support for like 900 different node modules. So it turns out that Bunyan is a pretty popular logger in the node world. And for Splunk, there's an integration that will allow you to use Splunk with Bunyan. So I'm requiring the Splunk Bunyan logger, and then I'm requiring Bunyan. So now here is my code for my Webtask. Now because I'm working with Twilio, I need to actually have direct access to the response because it's XML, yes. And I need to be able to override the media type to say that it's XML and to be able to return that XML payload. I don't want it to just go back as JSON. So I'm using the signature that allows me to get access to the context, the request, and the response. You guys following me so far?